All right, we are rolling. We are back. DJ Bone is at it again. This is part 3 of studio time for the track called Desolate. So all I did right here is created an empty project and then added in an audio track. And this is the mix down, the rendered version of the mix Desolate. So first thing I do is after I bring it in here, make sure my beginning and end points is exactly where it needs to be for the song. Then after that, kind of make it a little bit big just so I can see everything, all the peaks and whatnot. And this waveform is actually a little bit bigger than what I normally go for, but let's work with it. Let's see how it comes out. So then once the audio track is here, it's the only track I need. I go to the master, break out, should we go manual and go plug in this, plug in that, just effects chain it out? Or, let's just do it. Let's just go Ozone. That's cool. Ozone 8. The pinwheel, it's gotta do its magic. All right, so let's minimize this so that we can see everything. Oh, as you can see, good thing I zoomed in because I didn't actually put it in the beginning. So I'm going to loop that. That will put it right at the beginning all the way to the end for me. Turn off the loop. So now our selection is good for the full render. All right, so usually what I do is I go to the loudest part of the song or where most activity is going on. So
yeah, that's that good thing.
Okay, let's just do this section right here. So even though by default I always throw a loop on the whole song to get the selection and everything, but because I only want this section to be looked at, I'm only going to loop that section. So now I'm going to go back to Ableton. I'm going to go back to Ozone. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can do the master assistant. You know what? Let's try it. Sure. We're going to go for the target of CD quality. Low, medium, high intensity. What to do? 1% in comparison to 3%. Well, because this waveform is a little bit bigger than my norm, I think I'm going to try the high. All right, so then right from here, once I hit next, it's going to say, okay, let's hear your tune. So let's have it do its magic, and then we'll do the tweaks after.
I'm the main thing, and I'm the one that's making it happen. I'm the main thing, and I'm the one that's making it happen.
Okay, as you can see, make sure we're back on here. All right, as you can see, it did its magic. It tried finding its transients, peaks, all that stuff. So first thing I look at is the equalizer and see what it kind of wanted to do to the track. So it looked like it wanted more low end and then the roll off on the high end, which is totally normal for that. Well, for me anyways. For this style of music. All right, so if we press play, let's see what the activity of the waveform is doing here, the spectrum. Okay, now let's A and B with and without the EQ.
I'm the main thing, and I'm the one that's making it happen.
Okay, so it definitely warms it up more. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring it down just a little bit because that's a lot. Sometimes I will do the roll off. It's probably best to. So if we take number 2, for example, do the low pass or high pass, sorry. And let's bring the frequency all the way over as far as it will go, 20 hertz. And then let's bring it down some. Well, not bring it down, but let's get that nice and tight. So that way it's keeping the first band that it chose of the low shelf. And then I'm adding in a roll off from the high pass choice here, but very tight, because this section helps clean up the mud, and we don't really need that. It makes everything worse in the mix. So that's usually what I do there. Next, I'm going to check out this section here. This is the frequency that usually hurts your ears. So let's see how that sounds. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to be singling out certain areas of the frequency range in this section. And by doing that, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click and hold and drag it around and listen. So right about here, I can tell that it's got a little bit too much of that piercing section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab number 6, choose the bell, and it's actually right in the area where we want it. And I'm going to drop that down just a little bit. And that's it. Just very, very subtle changes. Dynamics, according to the master assistant, it didn't need it, and that's because of everything that I did for the effects chains of the bass synths and whatnot. Sometimes I still use it, and when I do, I turn it on, and I'll add more bands instead of just the one that it's given us here, and A and B it. But for master assistant sake, let's just go without. Let's just take it out of there. All right, dynamic EQ. This is where it's going to be ducking these certain bands that it decided to choose and drop them. So let's see how it sounds. All right, why are we getting some lag here? What's going on? Wow, that sounds like shite. Okay, so according to these bands, this is like the area where like the snare comes in, and then your sub is right here, your mid band, and so on and so forth. So usually what I do here is, because these are heavily ducked, I usually highlight these ones that are a little bit too far than the norm, and I'll bring them up just a little bit. So then after that, I'll check out my maximizer and see what that's doing. So besides the glitchiness, I don't know what is going on there. That's the first time ever. You can see that it's ducking the peaks and it's trying to balance everything out. And that is actually pretty good right there. It doesn't need more, because otherwise it's just going to become squashed way too much and it's just going to sound like poop. All right, so then after that, then I usually bring in I'll bring in the imager. I'll put it before the maximizer, because you don't want this after your limiter and all that. So then sometimes I'll hit the learn button and see where it takes me, but most of the time I leave this where it is, because from here over for the sub, that's actually the perfect range. The mids, it sits well, and like this is a good starting point. So the subs, I'll solo out, and you can see that we're already almost mono for the low end. But I always bring the stereo width all the way down on that. That way it just shoots straight through. After that, I'll check out the low mids. And that's pretty good. You got some spread there, but it's not going too far out. And we don't want to lose anything if we keep going further and further out. That's the whole point of the V right here. Because, yes, you do want spread, you know, like depending how far you want it to go. But usually I try and stay within this area. So then after that, I'll check out the medium highs. Not too bad, and it's not jumping too far past zero. It's not going past zero because you don't want that. And let's check out the very highs. That's actually hitting zero once the snare hits. So I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. That way it doesn't go past zero. So then as a whole, that's pretty good. You got some spread coming out to the edge here, but it's not ridiculous. So I'm going to leave that exactly where it is. So then after that, last but not least, what I'll do is I'll grab the exciter, put that before the imager, and then I'll leave these bands exactly the same way as the imager was, and I'll solo out each one. And if they need that oomph, I'll go with that. I'll make some adjustments. By default, it's the triode. You could go analog, retro, and stuff, but I kind of like the triode because it just works out good. Because if you go too much, you can hear the distortion, and the transients come out more, which is what you want, but you just have to do it by ear and find out where is your stopping point, and then I'll bring it back just a little bit. So like right there, full, you can hear the distortion. That sounds good right there. I think I'm just going to leave it right there. Nice and warm. Now I'm going to do the low mids.
I'm the main thing and I'm the one that's making it happen.
That's pretty good right there. Mid highs. And the very highs.
I'm the main thing and I'm the one that's making it happen.
So that right there just kind of beefs up all the bands in that spectrum, and I like doing that. So then after that, I will turn on dither, and by default it's 16-bit, which is like your CD quality. Dither, medium, and then noise shaping is set to high. And by default, that's what it is, and that's usually what I leave it at, because otherwise you'll be messing with like the white noise and stuff a little bit more. And as you can see in the frequency spectrum, this is where the dither comes into play. And that's all I do with that. So then after that, I'll go to codec, and I'll choose 320 kilobytes at MP3. So then I'll turn this on. So then after that's on, it's going to mimic what this song will do when it's an MP3 at 320 kilobytes. So I'll check my levels and make sure that I do not go past 0 for decibels. And if I do, I'm going to bring down the ceiling in the maximizer. So as you can see, we're going about 1.25 decibels over 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to subtract that. So I'm going to go minus 1.25. Now we're going over just 0.06 of a decibel. So with that being said, I'm going to go negative 1.3. I'm going to click this to reset it and see what it does.
I'm the main thing and I'm the one that's making it.
All right, I'm going to go negative 1.4. Reset.
I'm the main thing and I'm the one that's making it happen.
So as you can see, I'm kind of going over now 0.14 in certain areas of the song, but it's not as constant. Now, you can go over 0, but only if it's like the very tippity top of a sound, you know, like a transient type thing. Just that little bit of information, whether it's like a snare or something, it's okay because like it's hard to explain. Like if you go over 0, obviously if you're going to be playing this on a big system at a club or whatever, you might have that chance of ruining the system that's there because you're going over. That's all there is to it. You don't want to go over. So with it being 0.14, I'm actually going to do a little bit more. So I'm going to go negative 1.5, reset it, try it again.
I'm the main thing and I'm the one that's making it happen.
All right, 0.15. So let's go negative 1.6. And of course, instead of just doing the ceiling, you can bring the threshold back a little bit more, but I usually just work with the ceiling for this part, for the codec, for mimicking what an MP3 would sound like. Nice. All right, that will work. So I'm going to leave that like that. Now, after that, I'm going to listen to other areas of the song. Oh, real quick. I have to turn off the codec, because that's just to mimic it, because then this way now you're hearing everything like it should be. I'm going to select all for the track, loop it so that everything is selected for that track, unloop it, but the bar's still there. So if I go to render, it's going to do the whole song. Now I'm going to listen to other areas and just see what it sounds like.
I'm the main thing and I'm the one that's making it happen.
All right, I think it sounds pretty good. So now when... Whoa, what is that doing? Did you see that? Did you see that? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to render. So let's export 44.1. I always go IF instead of WAV. The only time I ever have to use WAV for anything is like something like CD Baby, when you have to upload your raw track. They prefer WAV. I just like IF because I'm Apple, and it's just what I rock. I don't do any dithering because we already did in Ozone, and then I export. So I'm going to throw it under Desolate and call it the same thing. And then I usually do a little bracket saying this is the master, because I always write down mix and then master so I know which one is which. Would help if I put the track title in there too. All right. Yeah, so now that's going to render down. And another thing with the wave option, today I uploaded a track called Enemy, and that is going to be released all digital store outlets. It's going to be on Spotify, Pandora, iTunes, Google Play, all those. DJ Bone, that's 80N3, and the song is called Enemy. This track is already up on SoundCloud. I'm going to adjust this microphone so that this thing doesn't go flying again. And you can already listen to the whole track, and I'll eventually put the link once it gets released to be able to purchase it. But otherwise, next Friday, the 26th of October, 2016, that track will be released. So I'm super stoked. That one is a gnarly track of mine. It's just nothing but grit and straight up anger. I minimized it somewhat, so yeah. Now that little window's gone, I'm never gonna know when it. Oh yeah. Great. So now I gotta wait for that to render. Other than that, that's usually the most smoothest way I like to master music. Normally I prefer to do like single effects, making an effects chain. I'll normally start off with like a compressor. Or no, not a compressor. I'll start off with an EQ. And similar to Ozone, I'll kind of pay attention to the spectrum of the wave as it's playing and seeing what's going over zero too much. And then I'll bring some of those down. Other than that, after the EQ, sometimes I'll throw on a saturator. Then I will usually, well, it depends. I'll sometimes throw a compressor on there. That way it kind of brings everything together and nothing is louder than anything else. Like, it's so hard to explain. But after the compressor, sometimes I'll throw in a multi-band dynamics, and that will kind of brighten up all the transients of the bands, your low, mids, and highs. And then after that, I'll throw on the limiter, and that will make it so that nothing goes past whatever threshold we're going to tell it to be. So if we wanted the song to be played at 0 dB, the limiter will make sure it doesn't go past 0 dB. And then sometimes I'll do like negative 0.30 for the ceiling, and then that way everything is safe. And then just everything else is just by ear. Once all those effects are in that row, in that order, as I'm listening to it, I'll just make some tweaks, and then I'll print. I'll render it down and decide what I'm going to do with it. Because I got I think I'm at 15 tracks unreleased so far, and they're just sitting there collecting dust. All different styles, trap, dubstep, drum and bass, kind of like the melodic dubstep, like Virtual Riot or something. But yeah, lately I've been getting into the heavier stuff, where I'm using more square waves and just being gnarly at it. I know it sounds funny to say it like that, but that's pretty much it. It's like I just want that real pissed off, gritty, in your face bass synths and heavy kick, heavy snares, busy hi-hats. Yeah, and that's about it. As for like chord progression goes, usually I'll start off with like the root note, whatever note it may be, and I'll add a couple notes here and there during the drop for variation. But otherwise, before the drop or the bridge, I'll have more melody come into play. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So this was part 3 of Desolate and studio time. Yeah, I hope you guys like it. I'll throw it up on the SoundCloud so you guys can download it. This one's for free. I don't care, you know. But until next time, guys, studio time. There will be more. There will be more. Until then, peace.